Okay. So it is almost 6 o'clock. And treat it like it is because everybody who needs to be here right now is here. I appreciate you both for showing up. My name is Christina. I'm the project manager for the Living Archives Project, which is a 3-year project with the Living Museum of the New South, Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, and the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke, and Johnson C. Smith University. I'm sorry. It's late in the day, but this is a artist interview that we're holding, our first one of a series of conversations we'll be having. We have the lovely Tiffany Grantham. Am I saying that right, Tiffany?
Yes.
All right, great. She is a children's services specialist and librarian with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. She's a native of North Carolina and a Charlottean for the past 11 years. She will be interviewing our honored guest, Wally McNair, who worked on the incredible project, Pandemic COVID Stories. If you haven't gotten it, please go to your library branch and pick it up. It's a graphic novel and it's just beautifully done. Wally was born in Lumberton, North Carolina. He was raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. And in his words, he uses his creations to express and tell stories for the voiceless. So I just want to thank both of you all for coming. Thank you, Wally. I'm excited to just jump it off, and I will be moderating. So if anybody has any questions, just put them down in the chat box. We will have a time for that at the end of this conversation. So I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Crystal. Hi, Wally.
How you doing?
I am doing wonderful. It's good to see you kind of face-to-face, virtually. So first, I want to talk about this amazing graphic novel, Pandemic. I don't know if anybody can see it. So my first question to you is, how did you become a part of this project with Charlotte Journalism? And I'm going to show just like the first page as you answer your question.
Okay. Yeah, a good friend of mine, Marcus Kaiser, who's also an illustrator and graphic designer here in Charlotte. He's a part of a lot of different boards and activities that's going on in the city. And he, I think he connected with Manoush and a couple other people that were planning to put something together and trying to figure out a path of where to go with it. And once they started figuring it out, he reached out to me and asked if I wanted to be a part of it and just kind of moved from there.
Okay. All right. So, and were you able to pick your story for the illustration? How did that work?
Yeah, they pretty much, they had a Zoom call with all the artists and the writers, the news reporters who were involved, the journalists who were involved. And they gave us a rundown of what the different stories were and kind of put it out there for us to kind of pick and choose who we would work with and how we'd collaborate and how we do it. And everybody just kind of picked different stories that either connected with them in some way or that just felt like they could illustrate that story and get that visual across for the story. So it was pretty smooth process, honestly.
Okay, and so you were able to pick your story. So you chose Cedric Meekins. So what was it about his story that connected with you, and how important was it for you to bring his story to life?
You know, I think just the fact that for me, it was just the realities of what was going on, especially at the time. We were early into a lot of what was happening. We were still trying to figure out a lot, but his story was, he survived it for one, but what he went through in the process of COVID and everything related to it, I felt like it was, it brought certain realities to people that it wasn't just the cold like some people thought. It wasn't just, you know, I mean, there was levels to what could happen as a result of it. And hearing what he went through, what he survived, and what he was afterwards, and his outlook on life, it just, you know, it's a story that was just a realistic, honest story. So I'm used to doing like action adventure type stuff, or, you know, really cool designs on characters, but being able to tell the story of an actual person who has survived something like this just felt real important.
Okay. All right. And just to go back to the graphic novel, I'm looking through these, and like Crystal said, if you haven't gotten your graphic novel, please do. The artwork is beautiful for one. And it really does bring Grace to life. And with Cedric's, if I remember correctly, did he lose his father? Was he the one, not character, but the person to lose his father in the process as well? Or was that?
I think it was another person, but Cedric did witness someone else in the hospital at the same time as him who didn't make it.
Oh, wow. You all had those conversations, not just about him personally, but everything that he saw during that time.
So I didn't get it. I got a brief interaction with Cedric through the reporters, the journalists who worked with him, Nate and David, but they got to spend a lot of time with him. They had actually done a story on him prior to this and then brought that information back, and we sat and just kind of went over in deep detail audio that he had recorded, just kind of journaling, keeping a journal of what was going on and things that he had told them that he experienced. And so one of the key things was him being in the hospital with someone who was younger than him, seemingly perfectly healthy, who didn't make it. Within a few days of him being there, they didn't make it. And the realities of what that felt like for him and mentally what that meant for him, just thinking about what if this doesn't go well, So right. Yeah, it was a lot of different layers to it. But that was one thing that stuck out heavy, to know that you're dealing with something of this nature, someone else that you come in contact with is dealing with it as well, and they don't make it out of it,
Right. The pandemic has definitely put everything in perspective, at least in a few ways, if not just one. So I want to go back a little bit, well, way back, to when you first started drawing. Do you remember your very first drawing?
It was probably some stick people, or drawing on my aunt's walls in her house that I shouldn't have been drawing on, something like that. It was probably something crazy that I shouldn't have been doing.
Okay, yeah. Was it at least crayons and not markers?
I'm pretty sure it was markers. It was something that had to be painted and a few times over. Yeah, I was terrible.
Okay, and when was the moment you realized that you were an artist, like you claimed the title of being an artist?
I still struggle with that title and what that really means, because it seems to be such a wide perspective of what that can be. So I normally just say I'm a creator and just keep it simple, for me anyway. But the first time I really looked at art as being a way to accomplish something, my great grandmother, when I was super young, she used to show me reruns of Good Times. And I always tell the story of her showing me JJ doing the paintings and the Sugar Shack picture that comes on, I think, at the beginning and towards the end. And her explaining, because I thought this was a show that was happening real time. And she's like, nah, these are reruns. This is an old show. But the cool thing was finding out that Ernie Barnes was the main painter behind a lot of those pieces, and he was from North Carolina. So one, he was Black. Two, he's from North Carolina. And he went to school and played football, but decided to follow more of a passion of his art, and had a very huge impact on the reality. That was the first time I realized that you could actually make a living with art. Wow. It was the first time it was put into that perspective for me. So from that point on, it was like, I'm gonna figure this out one way or the other. I'm gonna get there. So that's what it became.
Wow. Do you remember your first show, like your first art exhibit? What was that feeling like?
The show itself felt amazing because a group of us came together and we had no clue about doing an art show. We had absolutely no clue what we were doing, but we knew that there was a voice that wasn't being heard, and we knew that we wanted, this is before, we were super young, and we just knew that it was hard for people that came from where we came from to get our voice out there. There wasn't a lot of us at the time, even in the field of art, that were being paid attention to at all either. So we pretty much scraped our money together, came up with an idea, a theme, rented out a gallery space, and promoted it and marketed it on our own. So it was, it felt great to do it. But during that process, we realized that even in the world of art, there's a lot of obstacles. We had people telling us that they couldn't host our art show because they couldn't afford security. And we're like, yo, this isn't a concert. This isn't like, wow. going to war with anybody. Like, we're literally doing the same thing that you do here. It's just a group of young people of color. And when that happened, it just pushed us even more. And we opened the doors to other artists from whatever walk of life that felt like they had a story that wasn't getting told. Because we realized at the time, a lot of galleries just weren't open to being diverse. They weren't open to having other representation. So we just did it on our own terms. And that's the life we come from. So it wasn't strange to us, but it felt great to succeed because we kept being told we wouldn't succeed. It couldn't be done. You know, this is not cool. This isn't like, if you was in New York, maybe, if you was in California, maybe. And we're like, nah, Charlotte's more than just banks and sports. So we're going to make sure we put that out there. So that's what we did. So it felt great. That was a great experience, you know, a learning experience all the way around.
Yeah, persevering past no, I absolutely believe in that. So do you see those same obstacles reoccurring, or do you think times have changed, especially since it was in Charlotte?
I think it's a little of both. You know, some people are still stuck in their ways, and that's fine. You know, even the definition of what fine art is or what art should be, you know, even the battle between traditional art and digital art and the different sides of that perspective of it. From the standpoint of representation, a lot of the younger artists who are coming up, you know, either we have mentored or worked closely with just out of respect because we didn't have anybody to look to when we were coming up. And I see them either paving their ways like we did, or new people coming into the fold, I guess the gatekeepers, so to speak, opening it up and changing and more opportunities being created. And if they're not there, a lot of these younger cats aren't sitting around and waiting. They're going on and pushing forward. So whether people want to see the change or not, it's happening, it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time and the process of getting it there. But it's definitely different. It's definitely different from where it was. I think for me, I'm always looking at whether or not what's happening is happening for the right reasons more than anything now. Some people are just looking for photo ops and the ability to stand with certain groups and say, yeah, I did that. And other people are really in the fight to see change and be better and see just more opportunities. I mean, nobody wants to watch the same thing on TV all the time. It would just be one or two channels still. You know, we have so many options for television now. It's the same thing with any other form of creativity that's out there.
Absolutely. So what changes would you like to see happen still?
I mean, I think it's a constant evolution of what those changes are and what they can be. One of the biggest things for me, you know, I meet a lot of young artists who are hesitant to talk about pay and the business side of things. And a lot of times that's because they don't understand that there's a value in who they are and a value in what they represent and a value in what they do. So there's this hesitation about speaking about worth. And I really think that it's important, on top of the creativity and the joys of just being a cool artist or whatever it may be, that there is an understanding of cost, and there's an understanding of respect for pay. We pay for any other service that exists without hesitation. And a lot of people treat artists like, you know, they're supposed to always be a starving artist, and artists often treat themselves like they're supposed to always be a starving artist. And that's not the reality, you know. I just want people to understand their worth and know that whatever you do today, if it takes you 5 minutes to create a piece of artwork, it took your whole life to get to the place where you can create that piece of artwork, especially if you've been actively studying and pursuing what you're doing. So there's a value to that. And I just don't want artists to get lost in being afraid of losing clients or afraid of losing opportunities. I know it's scary, but at the end of the day, we have to always understand our value and our worth. And so that's one major thing that I strive to push, making sure that artists understand that, or at least have the concept of that. The other thing I think is just continuing to break down and define what is art, the borders, you know, the obstacles that exist, and the reality of what some people define as representation and diversity isn't always what it really is. So let's get to the core of really defining what that is, and making sure that that's what exists, you know?
Okay. Well, earlier you mentioned not being able to at least claim the title of being an artist. And I know that some people who are in the creative fields, whether they're writers or painters or artists, claiming that title can be hesitant. And I think imposter syndrome does play a big part. It plays a big part in them claiming the title and them asking for pay and learning and what they're worth. Do you see that being a thing as well?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's always a struggle, and then there's always, for artists especially, the constant comparison of other artists or the next level of what someone else is doing. And does this make me an artist? Am I good enough to call myself an artist? So, people getting called out for plagiarism and what it means to plagiarize and what that really is or isn't. And so there's so many layers. It's like there's the cool, it's like high school all over again in some ways. Like there's these different groups and these different cores of what this is and what that is. So, for me personally, a lot of people don't want to be locked into a box either, because if you're called an illustrator, then people think that you don't paint or that you don't do graphic design or that you don't know layout or concept. And if you're called a painter, then people think that you don't sketch or that maybe you haven't understood, you don't have a clear understanding of other aspects of art, whether it be, surrealism or whatever. Like, so a lot of times there's that hesitation to define yourself as one thing if you feel like you are multifaceted or you want to become diverse in what you're doing. So I think there's a lot of struggles for some artists, and others is just simply, I'm an artist, that's just what it is, and whatever you take that as, that's what it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to it, and sometimes it gets way more complicated than it should be in the mind of an artist. It's just like, maybe we should just create and enjoy it from that aspect.
Absolutely. So I would consider you a multi-hyphenate, meaning like you spend a significant time in areas. So as a teacher and an artist, are there any other areas that you would include? Like you would, I know, well, teacher, creative, is there anything else that you would include?
I think that creative umbrella just kind of embodies a lot. Like, I'm not great at everything that I partake in, but I study and try to be a student of whatever I'm doing. So of course, working in the world of illustration, I get to work as a writer, storyteller, visual storyteller, and a written storyteller. Years and years and years ago, if you dig far enough, you might find out that I used to dabble in music heavy once upon a time. That was a long, long time ago. I'm an old 200,000-year-old man now, so I don't really get out there with the young whippersnappers and try to do all that hop stuff that's going on. But but that's just another form of the creative arts, I believe, as well. So but my most important endeavor is just being a father and a husband and a big brother. I think those things are what defines me as a person more than anything. And it circles back to the other cool stuff that makes my kids think a cool guy.
When your kids think you're a cool guy, you're doing something really cool.
At least for now. I think they might say Dad ain't that cool no more. I don't know. But right now, it works. So.
It's hard to impress children, very much so. So did you grow up with a love for reading, or was it always drawing?
It became drawing. And then I had a teacher, Coach Dockery and Miss Anton. They were both literature teachers, and they, at two different points in life, really encouraged me to write and read. And Coach Dockery was a football coach who had a degree in literature and a passion for literature. So he worked very hard, especially with young Black guys, to get us to read. It was like, look, I just want you to know like who you are, where you come from. I want you to know the stories that are out there beyond your neighborhood, beyond where you think you come from. And he was very, very influential on the aspect of reading. And Miss Anton was very, very influential. She would have us write journals every single day. She'd take them up at the end of the week and read what we talked about. It was pretty open. We could write whatever we wanted, but mainly stories. And she started calling on me intentionally to read, which was like not in my comfort zone at all. Like I'm writing for you to get this grade and we can move on. She was adamant that I would read. And she just started to encourage me to keep writing, no direction as to where this is going, but she felt like I had something, I need to keep pursuing it. So I credit those two heavily for being huge influences early on with me getting into this lane of creativity at all.
Okay. Was there a particular book that also influenced you as well? I know the professors played an important role. But because of their influence, was there a book that they led you to or that you found on your own that really stuck with you?
From a school standpoint, the Iliad, the Metamorphosis, 12 Angry Men, I believe, was about the 12 heroes that couldn't come to a conclusion about whether somebody was guilty of a crime. It was a story that just kind of made me really understand the different perspectives of people based on their point of reference and where they're coming from compared to where somebody else is. The Metamorphosis was just the first time I had seen something talk about something that seemed kind of sci-fi-ish, but at the same time dealing with the real life emotions of a person. So it was kind of interesting to read the story. And then of course, like the Iliad and things like that, those are just stories that took you on these epic adventures. And Coach Dockery also introduced us to the fact that some of these stories were loosely based on African characters, but just whenever, Greek mythology and things of that nature evolved, those stories would be translated over or whatever the case may be. But that was our introduction to understanding that these types of stories existed and we could read them and write them. So that's 3 that I can remember early on that were kind of heavy in different ways for me. And then I got into comic books, and that was a whole other conversation.
Okay, so comic books, which is your favorite?
Well, so Milestone Comics was a Black-owned comic publisher in the 80s, I believe. They were one of the first groups to pretty much compete with the DCs and the Marvel Comics and have ownership. So their character, Static Shock, came from, if anyone's familiar with the DC lineup, Static Shock, who's still with DC Comics to this day, was, well, really with them, but with a partnership with them. He was a Black character who was being put on television with Superman and Batman. So that was incredible because you didn't see a ton of that. Then Spawn later on, because he was another Black character, even though you didn't see him as a Black man often, early on, he was defined as a Black character, one of the first Black characters beside Blade to get a movie with Michael Jai White playing the character. And Blade followed that. So it was cool to see people that looked like me in those characters. Spider-Man probably related to me in a lot of ways, just because when you put the mask on, he could be anybody. He could literally be whoever. So that made Spider-Man interesting. And he was poor and struggling and trying to do the right thing and had all these powers and had to learn about responsibility and making decisions. So there was a lot of morals in the stories. And they had a lot of dope artists drawing it at the time. So that appealed to me as well. So those books were pretty heavy for me early on.
Hey, all right. I didn't know if I was going to be able to ask you if you had a favorite author or a book or not, because it sounded like the Iliad. That was it for a second.
It changes sometimes, like I might get introduced to something else and I'll be like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever today. And then I'll find something else and like, okay, this is the greatest thing ever. So, it jumps around. I just like things that have layers to it. And I like things that also have emotion to it, that connect in a way where people can relate. And I especially love things that tell a story from perspectives, that point of reference that everybody may not understand or may not come from. Sometimes that can bring people into why someone thinks or moves or functions the way that they do. I think Black Panther the movie did a great breakdown of that with the Killmonger character. For anybody who's watched it, which is probably everybody at this point, but the Killmonger character and T'Challa's character coming from the same place, but growing up 2 different ways and having 2 totally different perspectives of what it meant to bring our people to a certain place, So I love stories like that, where the villain isn't always the villain. It's more of an antagonist, protagonist situation than a good guy, bad guy situation when you look at the perspectives of where it comes from. Not to get too deep and extra.
It's perfectly fine. I actually, I realized getting older and watching those good guy, bad guy films and adventures, as you get older, you understand why the villain is the villain.
Right.
And it makes them more human. It makes them, they're not just out to see the world burn for no apparent reason. There's a reason and you understand it. So I definitely understand. So I think you definitely touched on this earlier, about what you want the younger artists to learn more about or to be more confident in, as far as like talking about the price point and knowing their worth. Is there anything else you would want artists to know? What advice would you give them?
So, I think that's an ongoing thing, and it's also, based on where different people are. But the key things for me are always just understand as much as you can about business, marketing and branding, and stay true to you. Like, don't worry about what somebody else is doing. Of course, you can use things as points of reference. You can look at what someone's doing and be inspired by it, but don't judge yourself based on what somebody else has accomplished or supposedly has accomplished or the imagery of. Like, stay your path. It's a marathon. Enjoy your journey. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be the short race. It shouldn't be the short race, and enjoy the process. And that's the biggest thing I can say. We all struggle with it. You want to be in a certain place and you're not there by a certain time, but there's still something to learn in that process. So just keep learning, keep growing. If you ever get to a point where you think you've mastered it and you know everything, it's time to do something else.
Absolutely. I believe firmly in forever being a student. I don't want to know anything.
Right.
So, all right. So any major lessons from the pandemic?
That's another one of those ongoing, right? Like
Ongoing loaded questions. Yeah.
right. Every day it seems like there's something else to learn or be confused about or concerned about or whatever. But for me, the pandemic has being an artist, you're kind of isolated all the time anyway. So for me, it didn't affect me the same way as it may other people because I'm used to spending hours and hours on end working and being myself, other than my kids and family coming around. But it definitely reiterated the value of those that are important to you. For me personally, it also I don't know. I think the question is constantly, what's the end game of all this? Like, where do we end up when it's all said and done? But for me, I want to make sure with anything in life, I wake up each day attempting to be a better person than I was the day before. So getting caught up in the game of blaming one side or the other or feeling this or that, like I just try not to do that and focus more on, what am I doing and what do I need to be doing to try to make a better impact regardless of where we are and what we're going through. I lost people personally through this process in the past year and a half, 2 years. Have family who currently took every precaution and they're still currently in a fight with COVID right now. So I don't know. I think the biggest fear of all of this for me is being a dad, knowing that I can't completely protect my family. One of the biggest jobs you have as a parent is to protect your family and provide them the right decisions, the right path, the right guidance. And so not knowing what that is all the time is a very hard and difficult thing. If I make the wrong choice, do I put my kids in danger? Do I put my wife in danger? Do I put myself in danger? But the biggest thing for me is I took this as an opportunity to do even more with my family, gardening, teaching them more about going out in nature and just enjoying life to the fullest. And if they can come through this, I never grew up through anything like this. So if they can come through this strong, then whatever they face in the future should kind of be a cakewalk, So I don't know if to answer the question exactly, but I think there's a lot of ongoing lessons in this time that we live in right now.
Absolutely. I think you answered it perfectly, especially with your examples at the end. The pandemic really makes you put everything in perspective and forces you to look at what's really important and how much we were overly concerned with things that weren't important. So that was a great answer. We have a question in the chat, and this is from, I'm going to say Miss D. I hope you don't mind. So from Miss D, she asked, with all the feelings transmitted from many people during COVID-19, what feelings do you want to express in your art presently?
That's a good question, Ms. D. It depends, but in most of my work, it's always about one, hopefully motivation and some sort of inspiration. I remember a quote. Remember Nipsey Hussle saying it. I don't know if he's the original person that authored it, but the greatest human act is to inspire. So, you know, if my work inspires someone, or if my work gives someone an outlet, you know, like the same way a movie or a good book or a stroll through the park just takes people to a different place for a moment, then I feel like I've done at least a part of what I'm supposed to be doing when it comes to this work and this art and the creativity. So hopefully each person that sees something from my work, especially my gallery type work, you know, there's something in it that sparks a conversation, sparks a thought, and maybe takes them to a place they haven't been before.
Okay. And I see someone with their hand raised. Greg, if you have a question, would you mind putting it in the chat for us?
And I appreciate everybody who came on tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Okay. Gonna give them a second. So my last question, what is next for you? Was any projects, any more exhibits that you have?
So I'm working on something, I guess I technically can't speak on it yet. That's supposed to happen in November, pending what happens with the world and the pandemic and whether or not they can open things. It is a gallery event. Whether or not they can open things up on the scale that they hope to. Outside of that, I have some graphic novels that I'm working on. My website, I'm constantly updating with just new information on new projects. People can go to my Instagram at WollyV, WOLLYV. And right now there's a link to this beautiful conversation, but there's normally a link to my website where I'm constantly updating what's going on and working on new merchandise, things of that nature. But I'm constantly branding new things for either the books that I'm working on or just different projects that I'm putting together with other creatives or the artists. So the next big things are 2 graphic novels I'm working on, and then hopefully if everything works out and the world is still in a stable place, I'll be announcing a pretty cool gallery event in Winston-Salem.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I don't want to take up, I took up a lot of time, but I want to give some time for anyone to ask some questions for Wally.
They're like, yo, he said a lot. We don't want to hear any more from this guy. He told us his whole story.
Which was very interesting, by the way.
I appreciate
very interesting.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, since no one has any questions,
I have one question. It's D.
Yes.
I'm sorry. You are a phenomenal speaker, and the things that you're doing for the art world is very very good. I mean, this is the first time I even know that Charlotte had such an art gallery in it. And I'm new to Charlotte, haven't been here but 4 years, but it sounds very interesting. One of the things I just wanted to know is, how do you prepare yourself to get yourself in the mindset to talk to people who have experienced Corona-19, especially with it being such a loom and doom type of a disease, and trying to get your mind in a mindset of creating? How do you prepare yourself for that?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here, Ms. D. I appreciate you, and I appreciate those kind words. I just look at everything on a life level, and I try to simplify things to, if it was my situation, if it was me in the same situation, how would I feel? How would I want it to be approached? And with the creative side, it just comes, for me, I get inspired and motivated by the smallest things. My daughter walking in and smiling will motivate me to sit down and start creating. Seeing somebody else doing something amazing motivates me to push. I don't know. It's many layers, and each time it seems to be motivated by something different. But at the end of the day, it's just wanting to always know that I stay the same person no matter what. When you see me, I'm that same person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as best as I can be. Nobody's perfect. We all got our different moods and different whatever, especially as an artist when things aren't going, you know, in the creative fashion that you'd like for it to be. But, and I hope I'm answering the question, but essentially it's motivated by different things and different moments and what that moment kind of feels like it requires, you know?
That's awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Ms. D.
All right, we also have another question from Noah. He says, most people around the world have experienced losing loved ones during the pandemic. Have you or any of your colleagues been inspired to create works depicting the preciousness of time?
Well, first, Noah, I appreciate you coming in. I think you was one of the first ones to join in with us. Thank you. I mean, I think all of us, at least the circle I'm normally around, I deal with time in different sectors, right? So it may be just a moment that's inspired by something that I'm trying to capture and hold on to. And then, but it may not always be direct. It may not always be, you know, with my work, I try to let people find what they need to find in it, if that makes sense, rather than me tell them what's there. But behind the scenes, there's always something that has inspired that moment, or a place I have been or would like to be, or the story of someone else's, especially as it relates to time. And, you know, I always tell my family, I wish sometimes that I could just create this bubble and put us in there, and time has no more meaning. We just exist and we're happy and we're living. And sometimes my art reflects that. A lot of my work, I try to capture these moments that we would like to last forever. And, you know, that seems to be impossible, but through art, you can freeze frame and just capture these moments, you know? So I hope that answers your question, Noah.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, bro.
All right. So anyone else with any questions? Well, I just want to say thank you, Wiley, for joining us. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. And thank you to Living Archive Charlotte for planning this event. And last but certainly not least, thank you to every one of you that tuned in this evening. I know that you all probably had long days, and so we definitely appreciate you being here and taking the time out to listen to me and to Wiley, definitely to Wiley speak. And for more information on future programs, please visit our website, which is cmlibrary.org.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all, and have a good night.
Bye. Good night.
Peace.
Bye.